they used up in the mining districts when they blasted with dynamite. Today I'm going to tell you a story about a man associated with mining. He was kind of a dynamite type of guy, earned a lot of wealth, and left a great legacy. Speck was his nickname. He was born to an upper crust, blue-blooded family in Philadelphia. He had 6 brothers, but only 3 of his brothers lived through childhood. The 4 of them received lots of travel, great education, private tutors, and he and his 3 older brothers became Harvard men. His 3 older brothers were academically very sharp. They were bright. They did well at Harvard. They joined a lot of clubs, graduated top in their classes. Speck, on the other hand, was academically challenged. He didn't get it. He was not a good student. At Harvard, he tried out for some teams and clubs, but never succeeded and made any of them. He spent his spare time taking boxing lessons for 25 cents and learning to drink in some of the seamier bars in the Boston Harbor. He finally graduated in 1885, the last in his class at Harvard. But he had one claim to fame. One time he drank an entire pitcher of beer in 37 seconds. He returned to Philadelphia, and his father helped him get a job in a bank. 9 to 5 wasn't for Speck. After a short period of time, he cajoled his father into giving him a $2,000 grub stake. In true Horace Greeley fashion, he came west. Speck initially tried his hand at gold mining in Mexico. That did not pan out. He moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico, got into a retail wholesale business. It wasn't for him. In the winter of 1892, he was almost broke. He contacted his older brother, Dick, a geologist, and Dick advised him to look up their old childhood friend, Charles Tutt, who lived in the new city of Colorado Springs. Charles Tutt had an insurance agency and a real estate business. The first night that Speck was in Colorado Springs, he and Charles were talking business. They ended up at the Cheyenne Club. Speck was a heavy drinker. He ended up in fisticuffs with another club member, and much to Charles's embarrassment, the owner of the club escorted them from the premises. But at that time, Cripple Creek was starting to boom. It was gold mine time. Many miners were flooding into the area of the creek, as they called it then. Charles and Speck decided to open up an office in Cripple Creek. So they sent Speck up there, and he became the manager. They soon owned a dance hall, a boarding house, a bordello, and of course an operational gold mine and the milling process that went with that. Speck was a very cantankerous fellow. There was a social group up there known as the Socialites. They were Eastern educated moneyed men. And Speck was their informal leader. Whenever they were together, the alcohol flowed freely. Once during labor negotiations, Speck said, "No man is worth more than $1 a day," while he was lining his pockets with millions. He was talking about the miners. The labor negotiation ended. The miners were making $3 for a 9-hour day before the negotiation, and afterwards they made $3 a day for an 8-hour day. One of the Denver newspapers called Speck an obstreperous cuss. During a longer negotiation, the level of alcoholic beverages was starting to get low in the creek. Speck was a little concerned, so he saddled up his favorite horse, a beautiful white horse named Rabbit, and rode 40 miles to Colorado Springs. He hunted high and low for some bottled booze and couldn't find any, but he did locate a barrel of bourbon. Now he knew he couldn't carry a barrel of bourbon on horseback, so he went to the nearest hospital, bought about a dozen hot water bottles, filled them with bourbon, tied them to the saddle, and rode the 40 miles back to the creek for the negotiation. In 1903, he had the foresight to get into copper. His brother Dick had advised him because copper was the next boom. The electrification of the United States needed lots of copper. They purchased the Bingham Canyon, which is just in the south end of the Salt Lake Valley, actually where I grew up. In 1903, they started the Utah Copper Company. They began an open pit mining operation, and they used a new technique to mill copper from low-grade ore. The risk paid off. It was a huge success. They all became multimillionaires. Years later, they sold to Kennecott Copper, and they were all financially set for life. Speck was a confirmed bachelor. He worked hard, he was a heavy drinker, and he was a playboy, but only among the women of the bordellos and the Tenderloin districts in the mining communities that he frequented. He had moved back to Colorado Springs, and he met a young widow in 1901. She set her sights on marrying Speck. After a 5-year unconventional courtship, Speck was married at the age of 41. He and his wife started to travel. They bought lots of properties around the world and lots of homes in Europe. In 1916, they bought their first property in the Broadmoor area, an estate called El Palmar. El Palmar is Spanish for apple orchard. Speck became very interested in cars and exotic animals, and he started collections of both. He and his wife became very politically active because of the 18th Amendment, prohibition. It was said that from 1918 to 1933, Speck had one of the largest stashes of alcohol, illegal alcohol, in the U.S. It was second only in size to a man named Andrew Mellon, who, by the way, was the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury at that time. Speck and his wife bought more and more properties around, especially in the Broadmoor area, and in 1917, they began constructing a hotel, the Broadmoor Hotel. As many of you probably can tell or have guessed by now, I'm speaking about Spencer Penrose. Spencer and Julie Penrose built the beautiful Broadmoor Hotel and all of its amenities. The exotic animals that Spencer collected, 2 years before his death, he bequeathed in perpetuity to the people of the Pikes Peak region 140 acres and the animals. This is our Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. He also left the Penrose Hospital, Penrose Stadium. He started the Pikes Peaker Bust Rodeo. He had the Pikes Peak Highway built, and he donated that to the city before he died. 2 years before he died, he set up the El Palmar Foundation. The El Palmar Foundation today donates about $20 million annually to the Coloradans and the people of the Pikes Peak region. Spencer and Julie Penrose, they've left a legacy for all of us.